CD 4.
Chapter 27. Waiting was the worst part. He knew Ruth would come to check on him. She always did, making sure he was tucked up in bed like he was supposed to be and wishing him a stern good night. Samuel lay on his back, trying to arrange everything in his mind so it made sense. Ruth had done something awful to his mother, probably killed her, and she now knew that Samuel had figured it out. That's why she put the glass in the chocolate cake, to get rid of him before he told anyone else. He wasn't the one with the sickly mind, it was her. She was manic, a cold-blooded killer, and she meant to get rid of him so she could have the house to herself. This certainty wasn't without its problems. Samuel's father used to say that when you find one thing wrong in a notion of right, it's like a fly in the ointment. The postcards were the fly in the ointment, the one thing that raised doubt about Ruth's guilt. They had come from America, and they were written in his mother's handwriting. The boy couldn't deny that. Joseph said Ruth might know someone in America, a co-conspirator who was sending the cards for her. But how would that person know what his mother's handwriting looked like? Samuel flinched as he swallowed, his throat still aching. He would call the police and tell them about Ruth. Surely they would be able to help him. They would know his mother hadn't abandoned him with a monster like Ruth. That she hadn't just left him there while she went off to America to meet with those toffee-nosed bankers. They would know that something was wrong, and that Ruth had done a dreadful thing to keep his mother away from him for all this time. Tears pooled in his eyes, spilling over, but he chased them away, grateful for the darkness. He wasn't sad. He was angry, and that anger made his lips press tight together and his hands ball into fists. Everything was wrong, and it was all Ruth's fault. His rage had another source, too. Samuel knew that he had no proof. His mother wasn't in the cellar or the woodshed, and everyone believed Ruth and her beastly lies. Mrs. Collins was the worst of them. She had laughed with Ruth about his mother being stabbed and her body hidden away. She thought it was the funniest thing, the silliest thing she ever heard. The police would be the same, wouldn't they? They'd probably laugh just like Mrs. Collins. What Samuel needed was proof, real proof, and luckily he knew where to get it. Hadn't he seen Ruth through the keyhole, all hunched over, writing furiously? Joseph guessed that Ruth kept a diary in which she spelled out all her murderous deeds. The rightness of this theory sat in Samuel now like an old friend. Ruth was just the type, and that diary would read like a confession. All he had to do was get a hold of it, and then everyone would know what she had done to his beautiful mother, gone 119 days. The minutes slipped by, and Ruth didn't come to check on him. Though his mind was agale and his heart raged, in time, the angels of sleep drifted down and reached out their hands for him. His eyes had grown heavy by then, and though it wasn't the time, the boy found there was no other choice than to reach back. The landing above the hall rippled with morning light. It streamed in through the windows and poured across the wooden floors. Even the walls were a shimmering gold, and the marble pillars seemed to heave and swell, as if the sun was pouring into them. The light was so blinding, so impossibly golden, Samuel needed his hand to shield his eyes. He had seen her from his bedroom window. That's why he was running towards the landing. He didn't remember getting up, but he must have, and then wandered over to the window. That's when he spotted her walking towards the house. So he ran all the way. His hand barely touched the banister as he came down the stairs. The front door was open, sunlight flooding in like a fog, and when it cleared, Samuel looked down and saw her floating into the hall as if on a breeze. She was wearing her favorite yellow dress with the ivy around the trim, and her bags were clustered on the black and white checkered floor. She spotted him, and her smile was magnificent. "It's such a glorious morning," she told him. "I decided to walk from the station." Then she threw her arms out, her eyes only for him. "Oh, how I've missed my little man." They hugged for the longest time, neither one of them wanting to let go. She smelled of lilies and mint, and he could hear her crying, and it was all because she had missed him dreadfully and was so happy to be home. Then she pulled back and held his face tenderly in her hands. "Samuel." His mother's bright smile began to dim. "Samuel." Her hand slipped down to his shoulders and she started to shake him. Her plump red lips faded to a thin line. "Samuel!" His eyes fluttered open and he squinted, putting a hand up to his eyes. Through the web of his fingers he could see her, sitting on the edge of his bed, the soft light from the bedside lamp bleeding across her face. "I'm sorry to wake you," said Ruth, though she didn't sound sorry at all. "I didn't want to leave things as they were." She sighed and closed her eyes briefly. "We seem to be bringing out the worst in each other lately, and it can't continue now, can it?" Ruth was dressed in her robe, and Samuel wondered if she was ill. Her eyes were bloated, and while some of her hair was still twisted in a bun, long strands hung loose about her face. "Samuel, you mustn't give in to the sickness in your mind. You must be stronger than these wicked thoughts whispering to you of murder and wrongdoing." Ruth was leaning close to his face. Her breath was hot with an acridness the boy thought might be vinegar. He presumed she had been sleeping because her words came out sluggishly, and her eyes would close without warning and then spring open like she'd just had a fright. "I know the root of this problem, yes, indeed." She waved her finger in front of Samuel's face. "It's that Joseph Collins who first put this nonsense into your head, and don't even try to deny it." Samuel would have defended his best and only friend, but before he could, Ruth was talking again. "He's a fool, without a bit of common sense, and shame on you for believing a word that comes out of his mouth. Is he responsible for that foolishness about the cellar?" Samuel shook his head. "Well, I don't believe you, and I'm sure he's also the reason you were snooping in the woodshed the other day." Ruth saw the look of panic flash across Samuel's face and nodded. "Ah, yes, William told me all about that. He thought it was hysterical, you poking about looking for buried treasure or some such thing. I hadn't the stomach to tell him what you were really looking for." Ruth rubbed her chin as if she had a great itch. "Deep down, Samuel, deep down inside, you must know what's true. You can't really believe that I murdered your mother?" The boy pictured his mother, as she had been in the dream, in her yellow dress, the sun all around her, so happy to be home. And he knew that it would never happen. "Yes." "I see," she sniffed. "Then tell me this, Samuel. Why did I do it? Why on earth would I have done such a thing? Your mother's never been anything but fair and kind to me." Normally when Ruth asked Samuel a question, he would look inside of himself for the very thing that would upset her the least. But the right words, the ones she was hoping on, just wouldn't come, and all he was left with was the truth. "You murdered Mother because she was going to fire you." Ruth gasped, though she was smirking. Was she now? Might I ask why she was firing me? "The money's all gone. Olive had to be let go and Mother was letting you go too. And you got very angry and did something. And maybe you didn't even mean to do it, but you did, and then you had to hide the awful truth or else you would hang. Let us say you're right. Let us say your mother was going to let me go. Then what? Was she to take care of this house, clean and cook, look after you, and at the same time save the steel mill, not to mention keep it running?" Her eyes fluttered shut again. "Did you ever see your mother so much as boil an egg?" Samuel hadn't. "You know well enough that she could hardly stay in one spot for more than a minute." Ruth yawned and didn't even cover her mouth. "I want you to think, really think, Samuel. Would your mother have let me go? The one person who keeps this house running so she is free to go where she pleases at the drop of a hat." Samuel couldn't deny the sense in all of that, but it didn't mean Ruth was any less wicked. "Perhaps you do everything around here because you love this house," he said. "You love it so much that you want it all for yourself, and that's why you killed Mother." "Nonsense," said Ruth with a soft chuckle. "And you took Mother's jewels so that you could swan around like Lady Muck." "Lady Muck," she huffed. "Those jewels were taken to a man in Penzance while you were at school. He'll send them on to London, where we'll get the best price." She had an answer for everything, and that only made his mother feel farther away and harder to find. Samuel could feel that he was on the very brink of tears. "You're a bad woman." Ruth's hand came up and pushed the hair from his eyes. "I know what it's like to fret for someone and wish with every part of you that they'd come back. My pa went away." She shook her head like she was cross with herself. "No, not away. Died. That's what he did. I wasn't much older than you when it happened." Samuel didn't want to care about Ruth or her stupid father, but there were some things that practically cried out for answers, even from a scoundrel like Ruth. "How did he die?" "He was a blacksmith, a fine one too, but he never could be happy. He tried, he looked for it all over, but even when he found it, he never could hold it for long." Talking of happiness like it was a thing to be found and held didn't make a great deal of sense to Samuel. Pa would stay in bed for days sometimes, or he'd go off somewhere and come back a week later even glummer than when he left. Ruth shrugged, and Samuel saw that her eyes were slick with what he guessed was sorrow. "It's a terrible thing when a person gets worn down by life and decides it's not for them. Pa had tried once before." Samuel wasn't clear what he had tried once before, but he supposed it wasn't anything good. It was summer, and he stopped working, stopped everything. Ma did what she could to keep things running along, took in washing and cleaned houses for people in town. She was gone most days, and she put me in charge of Pa. Ruth patted her hair down like it was neat and tidy. The gun had been hidden away out of his reach, but this one day, I walked into the back room and Pa was cradling it, looking at it like he was waiting for it to say something. "Don't tell your ma," he says to me. "I'm going hunting tomorrow and I'm going to surprise her with rabbit." I believed him. I actually thought it was an answered prayer, that he was getting back to his old self. The boy saw the trail now, the path where this story was leading, and it made him sit up. That night while we were sleeping, he went down by the hen house and finished it. Ruth shut her eyes and put her hand to her mouth. Samuel saw that her fingers were trembling. "I never told anyone about the gun, but I knew Ma blamed me for not keeping him from himself. She hated Pa for what he did, and she hated me just as well. Gave me such a beating. I took it too. Know why, Samuel?" A great moan rushed up and out of her. "I was glad for Pa, God help me. He had his peace and I was glad." Ruth sniffed hard and pulled herself up, her heavy eyes finding Samuel. "My Pa was haunted by his thoughts, and I can see the same thing happening with you. It's got to stop. I know you're a boy, and seldom does a sensible thought enter a boy's head, but you must rid your mind of these malicious thoughts. It's a poison, and unless you fight against it, Samuel, the venom will destroy you and me both. I'm an honest woman with a good reputation, and I won't have you spreading this nonsense any further. Do you hear?" Samuel couldn't look at her, but he nodded. "I've been working in this house since you were 2. And though it's not my way to show it, I've always had the softest spot of all for you. That's right, don't look so shocked. Which is why it upsets me so, to think you really believe I could do something so unspeakable." She stood up quickly, then needed the wall to steady herself. "Well, this foolishness stops here and now. Are you very clear on that, Samuel Clay?" "Yes. I'll need the lamp to see myself out." Ruth turned and made for the door. "Shut it off when I'm gone, and good night to you." When the bedroom was once again in darkness, Samuel put his hand to his chest and felt it beating. And though he could feel the fear, he sensed that something else was causing it to thump so wildly. The excitement of a hunter catching its prey. Ruth thought she'd been setting his mind to rest with her story, but she had unwittingly given the game away. She was happy her father was dead. She said it made her glad. If Samuel had needed any further proof that Ruth was a killer, he had it now. Chapter 28. For all her sins, it was a length of red yarn that would be her undoing. Samuel couldn't help but smile about that. It was the reason he was down in his mother's study, switching on a lamp in the dead of night. This breakthrough began with the postcards. No, it began when he couldn't sleep, so full of thoughts about Ruth wanting her father dead, and how this testimony of her black heart, coming right from her very own lips, was a greater burden than the boy had imagined. For it confirmed something unspeakable about his mother. But while it was proof enough for him, he couldn't pretend it was evidence. Wouldn't it still be her word against his? And didn't Ruth have a way with words and could twist just about anything to her own ends? He needed her diary, or something else that would prove her guilt. Surely, if he thought on it long enough, something would materialize. The whole thing seemed to take hours and yielded nothing of any use, which Samuel had taken as a personal failing. Picking up the postcards from the side table was more a reflex than anything. He'd read each one 1,000 times, but their magic, he reasoned, the warmth that blossomed in his belly when he held one, must be absent now that he knew they were probably written by Ruth's wicked accomplice in America. Still, the handwriting was so like his mother's, the words too, that he couldn't pretend they didn't make him feel close to her. The pictures on the back of each card, a harbour, a bridge, a skyline, were as familiar to Samuel as the writing itself. As he gazed at them, or through them, his mind flew to the atlas and the tiny green flags and the red yarn he had tethered to each pin and the tugboat, trailing the yarn and stranded out in the Atlantic. What a stupid exercise that had been. He'd been captured by Ruth's lie that his mother was sailing home. Hadn't he eaten up every rotten word? Samuel had sighed then, thinking on the atlas and how his hopes and dreams about his mother were fixed in its pages just as surely as each pin and tag. It came to him without warning and without effort, as the right thought will sometimes do. With the postcards in his hand and the map in his mind's eye, an idea simply dropped into his head, fully formed. A thought so full of possibility it made him gasp. Was it the fly in the ointment of Ruth's murderous scheme? Samuel looked down at the postcards, finding the one he needed. He read it over. Then he practically leapt from the bed, the cards in hand, and crept down to his mother's study as quietly as he could. A pool of dim light washed half-heartedly from the lamp, barely reaching the atlas. But it was enough. Samuel's eyes travelled along the tracks of red yarn. San Francisco, Dallas, Los Angeles, Florida, Pennsylvania, Toronto, New York City, Boston. But it was the West Coast that drew him back. He lifted the postcard sent from Dallas, Texas, and dated May 24th. Dearest Samuel, are you missing me as dreadfully as I miss you? San Francisco wasn't the great success I hoped it would be. Bankers lack imagination by nature, but honestly, what an insipid lot. Their loss. I've roared into Dallas without a backward glance, determined to win friends and open checkbooks. I'll be home as soon as I can manage, my little man. Be good for Ruth. With love and kisses, Mother. Though he had read the postcard too many times to count, just like all the others, this time the words seemed to fracture under his watchful gaze, cracking open, to reveal the dark heart underneath the ornate handwriting. His mother wrote of arriving in Dallas after her disappointment in San Francisco, without a backward glance. That's what she said. Yet, in the very next postcard, sent 10 days later, she was in Los Angeles. That postcard was mainly about the weather, which was oppressively hot, and a promise that she would write again once she reached Florida. So his mother had gone back to California, despite leaving the West Coast with no intention of returning there. Samuel set down the postcard, returning his attention to the atlas. He ran his finger along the yarn from Dallas to Los Angeles. His mother had gone back when the postcard made clear that she was only moving forward. It didn't make sense. Ruth had made a mistake, that much he knew. But the implications were dizzying and raised other possibilities, which, given the late hour and the ghoulish thrill of this new discovery, the boy could hardly be expected to resist. What if the contrary postcard was a signal from his mother that she was trapped, locked up somewhere in America by Ruth's vile accomplice? It was a thought. His mother was being forced to write the postcards against her will and, being a clever sort, had planted a code, something only Samuel could decode, a cipher that would let him know something was wrong. Was that likely? Samuel didn't pretend the whole thing wasn't confounding, but weren't most foul plots complex by design? The facts didn't lie. In the postcard from Dallas, his mother wrote of having left San Francisco, and therefore California, without a backward glance, and then in the next breath she had returned there. Why would she do such a thing? Her words contradicted her actions, and if she had gone back, why not explain the reason in her next postcard? Instead, she had just prattled on about the weather. The boy was looking at the card now, shaking his head. It was shameful that it had taken him so long to see it, and though he wasn't completely sure what it all proved, a conspiracy this wicked was bound to be unfathomable to someone without a criminal mind. He only knew that he had found a fault line in the fiction, that his mother was merrily traveling across America, trying to save the family steel mill. And that meant something else too. Ruth wasn't nearly as smart as she thought she was. The park was crowded like every other Saturday, so the ducks were spoiled for choice. But Samuel wasn't really paying attention. He stood on the edge of the pond next to a mother with her 2 young children, both boys. The woman was crouched down talking to the little ones about this duck or that. She even had names for them, and all the while she had a hand in the small of each boy's back. There was such tenderness about this, and Samuel didn't want to hate the boys for it, but it was a struggle. Ruth had done well at the market that morning. All the shortbread had sold and most of the tea cakes. As they were packing up, Mrs. Price, the Reverend's wife, came over to ask Ruth if she could fill a large order of tea cakes and lemon tarts for Monday, as she had the church committee coming for morning tea and her cook had broken her wrist and was utterly useless. That was why Samuel was standing alone by the pond. Ruth was still chatting with Mrs. Price, pretending as if she were the nicest housekeeper there ever was. The boy hadn't slept after returning to his bedroom. Well, not very much. How could he? There was his new discovery about the postcards to reckon with, not to mention Ruth practically confessing her wickedness about being happy her father had killed himself. Didn't she just about put the gun in his hand? So it was not a great stretch to think she had done something equally rotten to his mother. The theory that she was being held captive in America had lost some of its power in the hard light of day. Was it really likely? No. He doubted his mother ever set sail for America. Whatever had happened to her, Ruth was behind it. The atlas pointed the way, if you only cared to look. But who could he convince to see things as clearly as he did? Wastes of good bread. Ruth came up behind him, buttoning up her brown coat. The ducks are all too well fed to pay you any mind. She'd been back to her old self by morning. Her hair pulled back, her face set in a faint scowl, barely saying 2 words to him at breakfast. Samuel figured she was probably angry with herself for revealing just what a monster she was last night. He didn't know why Ruth had talked so freely, so differently from how she spoke during the day. Perhaps she was sleepy, and sleepy people forget themselves and say things they otherwise wouldn't. Perhaps that was it. The mother with the 2 small boys gave Samuel a smile, and he did his best to return it. I don't mind when they're not hungry, she told him. In winter they must be starving, so I suppose they save it all up until then. Greedy is more like it, Ruth said. She had no tolerance for gluttony, even in ducks. If they didn't grab at every little thing, they wouldn't fill up so fast. The mother stood up then and took each of her children by the hand, leading them off with promises of toffee apples at the market. The boys squealed as if she had promised them a year of Christmases, and Samuel's eyes followed them as they walked off. Spoiled rotten, I should think, muttered Ruth. Come on, it's time we were going. You have the psalm to finish, and I have 6 dozen lemon tarts and 4 strawberry tea cakes to make. They headed home, and Ruth got started on her baking, while Samuel was instructed to sit at the kitchen table and get to work on his Bible passage. As Ruth rushed about, she would mumble to herself or hum what to Samuel sounded like funeral music. He stayed quiet, looking down at the great book but not doing very much of anything. Proof, that's what he needed. Ruth was a crafty sort, and she must have hidden his mother someplace no one would find her. She wasn't in the cellar or the woodshed or the stables. She wasn't anywhere, which meant Samuel needed Ruth's diary. Of course, he didn't know for certain that Ruth even had a diary, but what else could she have been writing in the dead of night? And when she heard Samuel at the door, hadn't she hidden it away in the drawer as if she were terrified he might see it? Yes, there had to be a diary. That's what he needed to prove what Ruth had done. That's what he needed so that she could be strung up by the neck until she was dead. Samuel stood. "Where do you think you're going?" Ruth was cracking eggs into a bowl. "I need pencils to draw the picture for Reverend Price," he told her. "They're upstairs in my bedroom." Ruth sniffed. "Be quick about it." The boy took the back stairs and ran the whole way. "No need to pound those stairs," Ruth yelled from below. "I have enough of a headache without your insistence, Samuel Clay." "Sorry, Ruth." Samuel hardly slowed as he moved across the landing. His thinking was very simple. The faster he moved, the more time he would have upstairs to find Ruth's diary. She'd probably written down all the nasty details, what she had done to his mother, and how she had suffered and called out for Samuel. And Ruth would certainly have written down where his mother was lying, all alone in some horrid dark hole. Did she know how hard he was trying to find her? Did his mother see him and love him even more for what he was doing? He thought she must, that she was looking down right at that very moment. Samuel didn't pause at Ruth's bedroom door and say a prayer to his father that it would be unlocked. He just grabbed the doorknob and pushed. But it didn't yield. He tried again in the way that a boy does when he hopes that the second time the door won't be as locked as it was the first time. But, of course, it always is. Ruth's door had never been locked before, as far as he could recall. It's not that she ever invited him in, but she'd never forbidden it either. And if it ever needed to ask her this or that, and she was in her bedroom, he would knock and she would say, "Come in," and the door would be unlocked. But not now. Only a person with something terrible to hide would lock her bedroom door. Something about having his worst fears confirmed hit Samuel like a slap to the face. It wasn't a poison eating up his mind like Ruth had said. A locked door was real enough. And hadn't Ruth been happy her father took a gun down by the hen house and shot himself? That was real enough. And Ruth stealing his mother's jewelry, real enough. Samuel wasn't aware he was crying. Not at first, because he was angry, and anger usually blew away the sorrow, or at least made it harder to find. Then he heard his own shaky breaths and the broken sobs, which were made even more wretched in the silence of the corridor. She wasn't coming back. Ruth had truly killed her, and she wasn't ever coming home. He remembered the dream he had had. His mother breezing into the hall, sunlight pouring around her, and the smile on her face that promised brighter days. He'd been right. It would never happen. The boy ran then, towards her bedroom door. He tried to open it, but thanks to Ruth, this small part of his mother had been taken from him too. His legs had a mind of their own, and as Samuel wiped his eyes, he saw through a fog of tears that he was running down the corridor to the very last door, his mother's dressing room. He'd been in there a few times since she disappeared, but Samuel was always mindful that his mother didn't welcome him there. He opened the door and stepped inside. Sniffing and wiping his nose, the boy looked around. The dressing room was large and abounding in sunlight. Along 3 walls were a collection of oak wardrobes, and across the 4th was a row of windows, and, in between, 3 mirrors, all at different angles so his mother could catch herself from every side. In the middle of the room was a round, red velvet lounge, and beside it stood a mannequin that his mother liked to hang her very best dresses on, for reasons Samuel couldn't fathom. The mannequin was bare, its limbless form the very shape and size of his mother, so it made sense then that Samuel would wrap his arms around it and tuck his head under its bust. He knew it was wrong. His mother had caught him doing that once before and had been very cross, but right now he hoped she would understand. When he had stopped crying and let go, Samuel walked slowly around the dressing room. He opened some of the wardrobes, looking inside. Most of his mother's dresses were gone, and the few that hung there looked rather lonely. Ruth must have taken the clothes away so it would look like his mother had packed them all into trunks for her voyage to America. She was a cunning one, old Ruth. The largest of the wardrobes took up almost half a wall, its bronze panels arranged into a diamond pattern. Samuel opened the heavy door and saw a single dress hanging there. Still, it caused his stomach to tingle and flutter, for it was a red dress made of silk, with a large pleated skirt that looked like the surface of a windswept pond. The memory bloomed inside of him, and it felt as if he were falling. The room suddenly darkened, and the wardrobe melted away as if made of mud, leaving only the dress. It was moving now, drifting across the room, and as it did, it began to take shape and fill out. And then she was there in front of him, fixing her hair in the mirror. "Mother," the word practically flew out of him. "Mother, I'm here." The light seemed to dance around her, hitting her pale shoulders and bouncing off. She touched her earrings, the ones his father had given her on their wedding day, and looked around, smiling. She said something. Samuel couldn't hear what. And then his father walked over, dressed in tails and a bow tie, kissing her cheek. "Mother," said Samuel. "It's me. I'm here." They were going out, he knew that. Going somewhere very important, and knowing that filled him with a dread so fierce he had to shut his eyes tight and swallow the shout that wanted to come up. When he opened them again, he could see himself, younger than he was now. He was flying across the dressing room, rushing at her. When he reached his mother, he threw his arms around her waist. "Not now, darling." He could hear the sweet music of her voice. She slipped her hands behind her back and unspooled his fingers. "Mummy's running late." "Ruth!" "He just wants to say goodnight," said his father. The boy was crying. He put his arms around his mother again and buried his head in her stomach. "He's already said goodnight," said the beautiful creature. "It's ridiculous that he does this every time we leave the house." Then, "Ruth! Oh, where can she be?" "Don't go," the boy was saying. "It's a stupid party. Please don't go." His mother pulled his hands from around her again. "I can't, darling, I can't." Samuel thought she was talking to him, but then his father came over and gently moved the boy away. But it wouldn't do. The boy yanked free and ran back to her. There were no words to explain it. He just had to find a way to keep her in place, to fix her to the ground so that she would stay, so that she would stop going away. "When will you be home?" The boy was holding his mother's hand, but it kept slipping from his grasp. "When will you come home? I will wait up for you." His mother didn't say anything. She just shook her head crossly and turned away. "Ruth, you are needed up here!" The boy was young and stupid back then. He didn't understand what was clear enough to Samuel now. These parties were important because a great many important people were there, and they might be able to help with the steel mill. And there was so little time to set things right. His mother didn't have time to play cards with him or hide and seek, or take him to the park to feed the ducks. Ruth was better at that kind of thing, and besides, it would bore him to always be by her side. And truly, if she was always unthreading his arms or pulling away, it had nothing to do with Samuel. He was her little man. Everyone knew that. But he had to know that being a grown-up was a complicated matter. And as his father told him over and over, his mother was doing the very best she could. "Ruth!" called his mother again. "Where are you?" The bedroom door shut with great force. None of the windows were open in the dressing room, but the door behind Samuel closed with an unholy bang. Just like that, the dressing room emptied. His mother and father and his younger self crumbled to dust, swept away as if on the same strong wind that had blown the door. The boy had jumped rather pitifully and spun around. Doors that close themselves are troubling things, so Samuel rushed at it and threw it open. That was the plan anyway, but the door would not yield. He twisted the handle and pulled hard, but the door refused to budge. He heard his mother's laugh then, but not her normal laugh, musical and light. This seemed to scratch its way across the empty room like a scornful snicker. Samuel looked back. The room was utterly still and silent, save for the odd snap and creak of its old bones. Only the mannequin, in the very shape and form of his mother, loomed over the chamber. It was probably a trick of the light, how it now seemed to be regarding him with great interest. "Don't go." They were his words, but the voice belonged to her. "Please don't go." She was mocking him. "Mother?" Samuel moved away, feeling the door at his back. "When will you come home?" His mother was laughing again. "I will wait up for you." "Stop," Samuel whispered. It wasn't her. It couldn't be. She loved him best of all. "Mother, it's me," she hissed. "I'm here." "Stop!" The boy was pounding the door now. "Go away!" The door swung open, pushing him back. He stumbled and fell to the floor, and Ruth was looking down at him, frowning. "What on earth?" Samuel got to his feet and looked behind him. The mannequin seemed rooted to the floor once again, lifeless and not the least bit menacing. "I suppose you'd have me believe you were looking for your pencils in here then," said Ruth. "Why were you making such a racket?" The door was locked. He turned back to regard the housekeeper. "Did you lock it?" "What a thing to ask! I couldn't open the door. Perhaps it was stuck." The boy said, "It wasn't stuck." "Who were you talking to?" Ruth's voice was tight. "You heard her?" he asked. "What?" Ruth entered the room and walked around it with a scowl, opening and closing cupboards. "Heard who? Who were you talking to? And this time I want the truth." Samuel pointed silently to the open wardrobe and the silk dress hanging there. Ruth looked in at the gown and then down at the boy, her eyes drifting about his face. "What fresh nonsense is this, Samuel?" It was as if the boy couldn't hear her. "Samuel, who were you talking to?" When no answer was given, the uncertainty in Ruth's voice was washed away, replaced by the safer waters of her censure. "You know the rules. This room is out of bounds. I've had all I can take of you wondering where you don't belong. Must I barricade every room in this blessed house?" The boy gazed only at the dress, for that was the best of her. His mother would never make fun of him. Her laugh would never be cruel. Ruth looked at the red dress too, a good deal longer than she might have liked, and then she said, "Utter nonsense," shutting the wardrobe with some force. Chapter 29. It was all her fault. The whole reason Samuel was bent forward, climbing up the hill in the heat of the afternoon with a pound of flour in his hand, it was because of her. Ruth had to make 6 dozen lemon tarts and 4 tea cakes. Wouldn't she know how much flour she was going to need before she got started? No, due to the fact that she spent half of her time chasing after Samuel, she had miscalculated. So now he'd been sent into the village to fetch a pound. Ruth had instructed him to run the whole way, as if she was sending him on a mission to save England. He hated her. The whole walk, there and back, had been spent wondering about how to get hold of the diary. The postcards and atlas were powerful weapons, but he needed more. And in order to reach the diary, Samuel knew he had to get a hold of the key to her bedroom. He didn't know for certain, but he guessed that Ruth might have it in the pocket of her apron. Hadn't he seen her put the key to his mother's bedroom in there? But getting hold of it wouldn't be easy. Perhaps he could spill something on Ruth, something sure to leave a stain like hot chocolate or strawberry jelly, and then she'd need to take it off and he could offer to carry it to the laundry for her. No, that wouldn't work. Ruth was wicked, but she wasn't stupid. There had to be another way in. He just didn't know what. Samuel was still panting as he came up the drive, feeling hot and puffed, and, as such, entirely justified in stopping off to see Robin Hood in the kitchen garden. But the rabbit was nowhere to be found. The boy's mood was now grimmer than ever, as he came around the front of the house, kicking the gravel and cursing Ruth. So at first he didn't notice the car parked under the portico. When he did, he hadn't a clue whom it belonged to. It was a glossy red with a fold-down top and white leather seats. As soon as the front door opened, the echo of voices carried out into the great hall. He heard Ruth's hideous laugh, which sounded just like a cackle, and another besides. It was deep and rich, and because he had heard it before, the boy started to run towards the kitchen. "None of that galloping about, thank you," Ruth said as he plunged through the door. As admonishments went, this one sounded positively jovial. "Sammy!" His uncle stood up and shook his hand like they were old chums. "Been down to the shops, have you, Ducky? Ruth working you hard, is she?" Samuel found that he couldn't stop looking at his Uncle Felix, as if he didn't quite believe that he was there. "Yes." "Don't believe a word of it," Ruth's voice bubbled to life. "He's the one running me off my feet." His uncle tapped him playfully on the cheek. "That right, Sammy?" The boy shrugged. "I thought you were going to London." "I'm on my way, as it happens. A few things came up that needed my attention, and I thought, wouldn't it be just the thing to call in and see Sammy before I go?" Samuel wanted to hug his uncle, but thought it might seem unexpected. "I've been telling your uncle how well you're doing at school." Ruth had set her baking trays to one side and was sitting in front of a pot of tea and 2 cups. I was useless at school. Samuel's uncle sat down and crossed his legs. Your father's the one with all the brains, Sammy. He threw a crooked grin at Ruth. Mind if I smoke? Ruth said she didn't mind at all. Samuel watched as his uncle took out a silver cigarette case and matching lighter and lit up, the smoke coiling from the end of the cigarette like a serpent. His uncle had come to see him. He must have understood that something terrible had happened, and now he was here to help him. Would you like another shortbread, Mr. Clay? Ruth pushed the plate towards him. Don't mind if I do. Only one thing stood in Samuel's way. Mother's been sending me postcards, Samuel said, setting the flour down on the counter. Would you like to see? I'm sure your uncle wouldn't be interested in those postcards, Ruth said. Oh, I don't know about that. His uncle took a drag on his cigarette, throwing his head back and blowing the smoke up towards the ceiling. He winked at Samuel. Show me. They're up in my bedroom. Samuel said this, pointing towards the door. If you'd like to come up, I'll show you my planes as well. Mr. Clay is only here for a short time, said Ruth, pouring the tea. If you must show him the cards, you go up and get them. I'm sure your uncle doesn't want to be climbing up and down the stairs all afternoon. With a heavy heart, Samuel went and fetched the postcards. Ruth wasn't going to leave him alone with his uncle, not without a fight. Luckily, a new plan hatched while he was walking down the back stairs. As his uncle looked over the postcards, finally selecting the one from Dallas, Samuel watched him carefully, looking for any sign, the faintest flicker in his eyes, any recognition that something about this whole thing wasn't right. Then he put the last postcard down and said, Your mother's in Boston now. Samuel nodded. He wanted desperately to say something else but didn't dare. Mrs. Clay has been all over America, it seems, meeting with the bankers and such, said Ruth. Samuel would love to hear from her more frequently, but as I've tried to explain to him, time runs away on you when you're abroad. Well, yes, I suppose it does, said his uncle. I have an atlas, declared Samuel. Father brought it for Mother, but now it's mine, I suppose. I have pins showing where Mother has been and yarn connecting all the places. And I could show you if you like. Samuel, Ruth started to say. I'd bring it in here, but it's very big and the pins might fall out. Samuel spoke rapidly, not wanting to let Ruth interrupt. Won't you come and see it, Uncle Felix? His uncle stubbed out his cigarette. Lead the way, Ducky. Ruth stood up at the same time as Samuel's uncle, but the boy had already thought of that. Ruth, you should go on with your baking. He turned to his uncle, snatching up the postcards. Ruth has a big order and they have to be ready by Monday. We need the money, you see. This caused his uncle to laugh and put a hand on Samuel's shoulder. But Ruth was beaten and she knew it. Mind you don't keep your uncle long, she said. He has a train to catch. As they walked to the study, there was a lot of talk about his uncle's travels. It seemed he had been everywhere, including Boston. Samuel never could work out what his uncle did for a living, but his mother once said that all Felix did well was spend money. Part of the reason Samuel was sent to the local school and not somewhere more distinguished, like his father and uncle had, was because his mother didn't want him turning out like his Uncle Felix, who she said was a pompous buffoon wrapped in tweed, dipped in gin and rolled in horsehair. She said it was a miracle Samuel's father had been so well adjusted and not even slightly an ass. Do you like it? Said Samuel. His uncle was crouched down, gazing at the atlas and all the pins which looked like tiny flags. When he pushed the tugboat towards England, the yarn stretching out behind it like a scarlet current, Samuel couldn't help but feel a certain amount of pride. Damn fine job, Sammy. Uncle Felix looked at his nephew. Must help, seeing that she isn't so far away. No, it didn't help at all. Samuel looked to the door to make sure Ruth wasn't there. You noticed, didn't you, Uncle Felix, about the postcards? Noticed? Of course, Ducky, they're terrific. You've got quite a collection. No. Samuel pushed the postcard from Dallas at his uncle. Mother didn't plan on going back to California. She says so right there, without a backward glance. But in the next postcard, now the boy pushed that one into Uncle Felix's hand. See? It's from Los Angeles. She went back even though she said she wouldn't. Samuel pointed at the atlas. Look, you can see that Mother left the West Coast and was moving east. Then, all of a sudden, she turned back. Why would she do that? Uncle Felix read over both postcards carefully and spent some time looking at the atlas, following the path of pins and yarn. His uncle gave every indication of taking the boy seriously, and Samuel felt a lump swelling in his throat that without urgent intervention would give rise to a loud and undignified sob. When Uncle Felix was done, he clicked his tongue as if to indicate a degree of bafflement that could only help the boy's cause. "You have a point, Ducky," Uncle Felix said, "but I'm not sure it proves anything." Without a backward glance. That's what she said. Samuel spoke with complete authority. So why turn around and head back to California? Well, let's see. As a general rule, Uncle Felix was wary of serious contemplation, so it was not altogether surprising when his frown smoothed out in mere seconds. He even slapped his knee. "Doesn't your mother have an aunt who lives in Los Angeles?" Samuel didn't know. Uncle Felix was nodding now. "I think your parents visited her on their honeymoon. Yes, that's it. I recall something about a rather enchanting estate high up in the hills. If memory serves, the old girl's a dried-up spinster with more money than Augustus Caesar." "So?" said Samuel, and the word was delivered with unvarnished contempt. "Well, we all know your grandfather is a tight-fisted humbug, so perhaps your mother wanted to rattle another branch of the family tree, hoping to loosen a few banknotes. She'd be a fool not to try, seems to me." His smile was horribly self-satisfied. "So, you see, Sammy, no great mystery." "Mother wouldn't do it, Uncle Felix." Samuel stole another look at the door and spoke in a whisper. "She wouldn't go so far away and for so long. I think—" His uncle's smile wasn't unkind. "You think what, Sammy?" Samuel bent his head. "I think Ruth knows where she is." "Ruth?" Samuel nodded. "Well, of course she does. Ruth's the one who first told me your mother had taken off for America." "No." Samuel looked at the door again. "I think she did something." "To your mother?" Samuel nodded. "Come and sit with me." His uncle pulled up a chair and had Samuel sit down on his knee, which made the boy feel like a toddler. "Now, Ruth told me you haven't been yourself lately, and that you miss your mother very much, and it's making you... It's upsetting you. Which is perfectly natural, Sammy. Don't you think it isn't? Look here, I'm the first person to think badly of someone. I have a gift for it, you could say. But this thing about Ruth, I don't think it's very likely. Why would she do anything unpleasant to your mother? She was going to lose her job. Mother was going to get rid of her. Of Ruth. I find that hard to believe. Your mother used to say Ruth was the only thing keeping her sane in this madhouse. And what about the postcards? You must see that your mother wrote those, and how could she be sending you cards from America if Ruth had done something unspeakable to her? Samuel didn't have an answer for that. Ruth is a stern sort, her kind usually are. Gives you a smack when you're cheeky, does she? The boy stayed quiet. Your father and I were always getting walloped by our nanny. Little terrors we were. Samuel's eyes drifted to the atlas. Ruth tells lies. I'm sure she does. I'm willing to bet that you tell the old porky yourself. We all do, Ducky. It's hardly a hanging offence. She took Mother's best jewels. Samuel was fixed on his uncle now, staring intently, so that not a single word could fall away or be misunderstood. She stole them, Uncle Felix. I caught her red-handed. Please, you have to believe me. Of course I believe you, Sammy. Uncle Felix patted the boy's back, and his tone was tender and patronizing all at once. Life's a complicated thing, Ducky. Difficult and untidy. You'll understand that when you're a bit older. Ruth told me about the jewels, and as hard as it might be to understand, she didn't take them for personal gain. It's her job to keep the house running and make sure you have everything you need. And that takes money. Rather a lot of it, in fact. He patted Samuel's back again. Don't you think it's a tad unfair calling Ruth a thief, when she was only doing as your mother asked? Just like that, the bright hope of this unexpected visitor, that surge of joy that had lit Samuel up like a lantern, was snuffed out. Ruth had got to him first. Something has happened to my mother, I know it has. Are you sleeping, Sammy? Said the uncle. You look awfully tired. Ruth took her away from me. Uncle Felix exhaled like he was smoking a cigarette. These fears about your mother aren't good for you, not one little bit. Don't you think I'd call the police if I thought there was any truth to it? You're my favourite nephew. You're my only nephew. But that's by the by, so I wouldn't steer you wrong, would I? Tell you what, I'm so sure your mother's in America, I'll wager you £5. How's that? When you get to London, would you check Uncle Felix? Check what? Check if Mother took a boat to America. There must be a way to check. Well, yes, I suppose there is. Will you do it? Will you check? His uncle thought on this for only a moment. It's a promise. I'll do it first thing, you have my word. And you won't say anything about this to Ruth? Don't look so alarmed, Sammy. It's not as bad as all that. And you won't tell her what I told you? Promise you won't tell. Not a word, Sammy, not one word. But he was looking at the boy like he wasn't at all well, and Samuel didn't believe him. Chapter 30. They never took meals in the dining room, but Ruth had made an exception. The kitchen table, where they usually ate, was crowded with trays and racks full of tea cakes and lemon tarts. The whole house smelled heavenly, though Samuel wasn't allowed to taste so much as a crumb. The Reverend's wife was paying good money, and there were none to spare. Besides, Ruth said they needed time to cool, which is why they were eating dinner elsewhere. It was very good of your uncle to come and see you, wasn't it? Ruth set the plate of roasted meat down on the table with some care. Samuel, the boy looked up. I said, wasn't it good of your uncle to come and see you? Yes, Samuel said. Ruth picked up a serving fork and the large carving knife and got to work on the roast. It was impossible for Samuel not to stare at the blade. Did you two have a good talk then? Ruth said. I showed him the atlas. And was he impressed? Samuel shrugged. He liked it. You were in the study a very long time. The smooth back and forth of the blade as it sliced through the animal was suddenly arrested as Ruth hit a bone. Samuel watched her face lock up, and then the whites of her knuckles as she pushed the knife down, snapping the bone in two. I would imagine you were talking about more than the atlas. Samuel shrugged again, which is when Ruth stopped carving. Or is it a great secret what you were talking about? It's not a secret. Samuel cast about for something he could use. Uncle Felix was telling me about when he and Father were boys and all the naughty things they did. Samuel forced a smile. It was funny. I'm sure it was. Ruth picked up a piece of meat and put it on the boy's plate. Your uncle is entertaining, that's for certain. Your father always said he would make a fine writer, if only he'd settle down and apply himself. They sat at one end of the long table with an oil lamp between them. Ruth said the chandelier was too costly to turn on for just the two of them. She then muttered something about the fine dinner parties that had been held there, and she said this so wistfully that Samuel was left in little doubt that those days were splendid and far behind them. For his part, the boy would have preferred the bright light of the chandelier, as the oil lamp could hardly compete with the dark red walls, and its soft glow had such a faint reach, it felt as if he and Ruth were trapped in a flickering bubble. Ruth took her seat at the head of the table. I did ask him to stay for dinner. He's always spoken highly of my roast rabbit, but he seemed in a mad rush to get down to London. He is going there to prove that Mother never did sail for America. That's what Samuel wanted to say, but, of course, he didn't. Not just because Ruth had forbidden any such talk, but also because Samuel doubted his Uncle Felix would even look into it. Yes, he had promised, given his word, but he also promised to have Samuel over to stay during the summer, and he never did. And Ruth had gotten in his ear and filled it with lies about the boy's sickly mind. It wasn't his poor mother Uncle Felix was worried about. It was Samuel. Everything was so wrong and unjust that Samuel didn't care for any of Ruth's roast rabbit or her chestnut stuffing. I don't know where your appetite has gone. Ruth was sprinkling salt over Samuel's potatoes, even though he never asked her to. You're already much too thin, just like your mother. People will think I'm not feeding you. I'm not hungry. Nonsense. What boy of 9 isn't on the brink of starvation most of the time? Ruth filled her plate, arranging the vegetables with some care. You forget that I've cooked for you most of your life, Samuel Clay, and I know your stomach is a bottomless pit. Samuel watched the heat rise up from his plate, and he blew on it. The steam wafted over the table with such promise, but in mere seconds it vanished, as if it had never been there to begin with. It's bad enough. Ruth appeared to think better of it, and ended the sentence there. She pierced a potato with her fork, and sliced it cleanly down the middle. An impressive cloud billowed up from its parted flesh, and as Samuel watched, how could he not, Ruth smiled faintly and blew on it, sending puffs of steam over her plate. Ruth saw the look of surprise in the boy's eyes, and it must have pleased her. I was a child once, myself, you know. She motioned to his plate.
Mind it doesn't get cold. I made this perfectly lovely meal just for you, Samuel. The boy sighed heavily and stabbed a piece of meat with his fork. He didn't want to eat, didn't want to please Ruth in any way, but it was as if his hands, his very fingers, moved under Ruth's command, and he had nothing to say about it. The meat took some chewing, the texture tough and unyielding, and Samuel's face buckled into a grimace as he swallowed it down. Gravy? When Samuel shook his head rather crossly, Ruth huffed. There was a time when you'd devour my roast rabbit with chestnut stuffing and be on to a second helping before I'd even sat down. What will your mother say when she comes home and finds you a shadow of the boy she left behind? The mention of his mother made Samuel want to fly at her, knocking her to the ground, but he didn't, because now his whole self was fixed on the roast, as if he was seeing it, really seeing it for the first time. He said, Rabbit? Ruth nodded and took her first bite. It's not exactly tender, but the flavor's good if I do say so myself. The boy looked only at the roasted animal. You said the butcher wouldn't sell you a rabbit until you've paid the bill. Ruth sniffed. Eat up while it's hot. Samuel shifted his gaze to Ruth. Did you pay the bill, Ruth? Enough chatter, young man. Eat your dinner. Ruth? She met his stare then, her dark eyes sparkling like struck flint in the lamplight. I supposed you'd have been happier with a boiled turnip for supper. The chair was still tumbling over as Samuel reached the doorway. He ran through the hall and into the kitchen, finding himself tearing around the room, every conceivable surface covered in lemon tarts and tea cakes. This was an unexpected comfort. Ruth bought all her meat skinned or plucked because she had enough to do as it was. There was no sign of the sort of ghoulish work that might have involved Robin Hood. The knot in his stomach was starting to slacken, and his mind was turning to how he might explain himself to Ruth. That's when he glanced down into the sink and saw the knife. It was smeared in blood, which ran across the blade and pooled around the edges like a crimson shadow. Running outside wasn't a choice. He just found himself there. Perhaps it was to prove that Robin Hood was under his favourite hedge, staring longingly at the row of cabbages. But Samuel never made it past the back door, for on the stone steps was a bucket, and even in the pale moonlight the boy could see its contents. The puddle of entrails and blood, and the folds of the muddy brown coat with that hint of ginger. He didn't gasp or cry out, or even cover his mouth, but the finality of this discovery felt like two hands pushing down on his shoulders. He was certain she had left these remains there so he might find them. Returning to the dining room was the only thing left to do. He walked into the darkened chamber with some purpose and marched over to the table, standing beside Ruth, as if his mere presence would be sincere enough to make her crumble. But it wasn't. Finished? She said, as if he'd been having a frivolous tantrum. I know what you did, said the boy. And what is that? Why? That's what he said next, and it was an honest question seeking an answer. Why, Ruth? We have to eat, don't we? She sniffed. Sit down and finish your supper. I won't take another bite! This was shouted without restraint. Suit yourself. Ruth didn't look up from her plate. Wash up and take yourself to bed then. And despite everything, the boy did as he was told. Did you brush your teeth? Silence. Samuel, I asked you a question. It was his only weapon and he used it boldly, turning his head away. Samuel, I'm in no mood for this. Her voice was stony. Did you brush your teeth? The boy sighed. Yes. Yes, what? Yes, Ruth. Are you sure about that? Samuel nodded. She pulled the covers up under Samuel's arms despite his attempts to resist, and made a few comments about the state of his bedroom, and the fact that tomorrow it would need a thorough cleaning, and he was going to help, because she had to finish decorating the tea cakes and lemon tarts, and the sitting room windows were in a state and would need seeing to. And did Samuel realize how this big house could just about break your spirit with its endless demands? When Samuel made no reply, his eyes fixed on the window, Ruth took a long breath. You're not the first child to lose an animal to the dinner table. I had pets when I was your age, all kinds. The farm was teeming with hares and chickens and pigs. I stopped naming them after a while because I knew that my pa wouldn't spare them. It's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. And around here, with an empty purse and a pile of unpaid bills, rabbits aren't pets, Samuel. They're food. It's my job to keep you healthy and strong, and I won't apologize for putting a wholesome meal on your plate. Ruth was a monster whose cruel heart swelled with gladness at every suffering. She killed things you cared for and named and perhaps even loved, cutting throats and stripping the fur from flesh. She did it with glee and served it up as a kind of torment, knowing that you would gobble up the thing you love, chew it up and swallow it down, and then have to live with the shame of doing so. Samuel looked up at this foul creature. "I hate you." This caused Ruth to sniff and pick up the clock beside his bed, wiping underneath with the hem of her apron. "Well, that's your right." Samuel held his fingers up to the lamp and watched the light collect around them. If he appeared to be playing now, he wasn't. All the while, his mind, which wasn't even a tiny bit unwell, spun with ideas about getting his hands on Ruth's diary. That was the only way to make her pay. But he had to get the key to her bedroom first, or else find some other way in. "Regardless of your feelings for me, don't think I've forgotten about your schoolwork." Ruth was walking to the door. "You'll finish the psalm and the drawing just as soon as we straighten this bedroom out in the morning. Do you hear me, Samuel?" He closed his eyes. "Yes." "Yes, what?" "Yes, Ruth." The trouble was, the longer Samuel thought on the problem, the further his thoughts travelled beyond the borders of reason. His ideas were wild and clever. At least he thought so. But they could never stand up to practical considerations. As such, the right answer always felt just out of reach. "Turn off your lamp and go to sleep," Ruth said. "Good night to you." Samuel did as he was told, and the room surrendered to darkness. For every question, there is an answer. That's what his father used to tell him. Even if it's not the answer you are hoping for, it's still an answer. That's what he'd say. Samuel needed to find out what Ruth had done to his mother, and for that he needed a way into her bedroom, so he could get hold of that diary, to show the world what a monster she was. A monster that would kill Robin Hood as easily as pulling a carrot from the garden, and then trick Samuel into eating him. His mind was a whirlwind, pushing away the yawns and the weariness that crept up the bed towards him, trying all the while to hit on a solution. Something terrible had happened to his mother, and the only way to prove it lay in Ruth's bedroom. He would not sleep until he had a solution. No matter what, he wouldn't sleep. Samuel woke up with a start. "Mother?" He blinked into the darkness. There had been laughter. He had heard his mother laughing. Had it been a dream? Yes, probably a dream, though in the fog of his mind he couldn't remember dreaming of her as he had before. It was as if that joyful cry had pushed itself under the door or through the keyhole and slipped into his ears. It was the laughter, its sweet heavenly music, which had drifted into his sleep and called him back. Samuel closed his eyes again. It was just a dream, nothing more than. The faint hum of voices breached the quiet, and it made him sit up, reaching for the lamp, as if the light might help him to hear better. Light bloomed in the dark room, and the clock said 10 minutes past 11. Samuel kept his hand on the lamp, not wishing to move a muscle or make any sound, not even the click of an elbow, as he strained to hear. The voices dropped away, and a peal of laughter, clear as church bells, lifted above it. His mother. Who else laughed with such abandon? It must be her. Samuel jumped from the bed. The corridor churned with a sea of shadows, each one darker than the next, and Samuel had to run his hand along the wall to guide him through its dark tides. As he neared the landing, the murmur of voices seemed to thin out until there was only one, and by the time the boy crouched down and crept towards the banister, the gloomy hall perfectly matched to his spirits. His mother wasn't there at all, laughing her sweet laugh, delighted to be home. It was Ruth, just Ruth, standing there in her bathrobe, talking on the telephone in the rusted glow of an oil lamp. "I'm not saying I won't come." Ruth had the telephone cord curled around her finger. "It's your wedding, Alice. I'm hardly going to miss that." She was talking to her sister Alice, and that was a cruel blow. It's just that I haven't a thing to wear, and before you say it, I won't allow you to buy me a frock, so don't even think of offering." She laughed then, that beastly laugh that was so unlike her, and sounded as if it had come from his mother. "Wouldn't I look a fright in my work dress and apron? Don't worry, I'll think of something." "Bring William." "Don't be wicked, Alice. I've got more sense than to fall for that man's charms, such as they are." There was a pause. "Do I? Well, yes, I suppose I am a bit tired. The boy keeps me on my toes, same as always. I know, Alice, but what choice do I have? I know, it can't go on much longer. Yes, something has to be done." Was he the boy she was speaking of? Samuel thought that he must be. Ruth chatted a little longer and then said her goodbyes, hanging up the phone. Then she picked up the oil lamp and began to climb the stairs. Samuel was already moving then. He crawled along the landing, then, when it was safe, ran down the corridor towards his bedroom. And as he went, he willed his bare feet to tread lightly on the board so that Ruth would not hear him. His bedroom door closed with hardly a sound of protest, and Samuel tiptoed to the bed as quickly as he dared and arranged himself under the covers. He turned off the lamp and shut his eyes, listening. There wasn't a lot to hear, if not for the occasional crack of a floorboard. Samuel might have imagined Ruth was floating down the corridor, or that she was standing very still and listening just as hard as he was. It didn't take long for the steady rhythm of her steps to make their mark on the stillness. Samuel heard her coming towards his door. He lay on his side and willed his eyes not to flicker when she came in to check on him. But that didn't happen. What the boy heard was Ruth passing by without so much as a pause at his door. Then he heard the unmistakable sigh of a door opening somewhere down the corridor, and in the dead of night, with a head full of troubles, such a sigh couldn't go unheeded. The boy moved quickly, his silhouette appearing and vanishing, as he passed the moonlit windows with their layers of milky dusk. At the very end of the hall, a soft glow framed the door. It was his mother's dressing room, and, as it was the only light on in the entire hall, Ruth had to be there. The floorboard seemed not to mind his light steps and made little noise. Ruth had been talking about him to her sister. "It can't go on much longer." Those were her words. Something has to be done. Samuel wasn't stupid. He knew what that meant. Ruth wasn't going to keep him around. The time was up. She would do to him what she had done to his mother, what she had done to Robin Hood. He reached the door and heard a faint sound, like a motor running low. Perhaps nobody in the whole world except for Joseph would believe the truth. They couldn't see what he could see, all the threads of lies and secrets that weaved around each other to make the whole blood-soaked tapestry. Ruth was a bad woman who had done horrible things. He knew that as surely as his name was Samuel Clay. Ruth planned to murder him. She'd just confessed as much to her sister. Samuel had met Alice once, and she had seemed nice enough, but now the boy understood that she had been putting on a show. She was just as wicked and nasty as Ruth. Probably they were in on it together. Samuel dropped down on one knee and moved towards the keyhole. No one knew what Ruth was really like, not even his poor mother, who said Ruth was like her right arm. Now he was the only one left, and he would have to stop her on his own. If the boy was to guess what Ruth was doing in the dead of night in his mother's dressing room, he would have been wrong. For as he peered through the breach, his eyelashes brushing the brass plate of the doorknob, Samuel saw the flash of something red flicker to his left. Just a flash. The oil lamp was set down on the couch where his mother liked to sit and put on her shoes, and its faint glow captured only the middle part of the room. There was no sign of Ruth. Samuel's eyes fogged up and he blinked. And just like that she appeared, spinning into view. Yes, spinning. Ruth had his mother's red silk dress pressed over her bathrobe, and she moved as if she were dancing, hugging the gown to herself. Samuel realized that the low sound he had heard was the housekeeper humming to herself. She paused in front of the long mirror and looked at her reflection, just like his mother would, turning this way and that and stroking the fabric like it was a cat, humming all the while. Then Ruth closed her eyes and spun around, melting into the shadows.
Chapter 31.
Hello? Hello? Mrs. Collins? Who's this? She sounded nervous, or perhaps it was startled. It's Samuel, Mrs. Collins. Samuel? My goodness, do you know what time it is? Yes. What's got you calling at this hour? Samuel had the phone so close to his mouth the receiver was wet. Could I speak to Joseph, please? He's sleeping, love. Oh. Samuel swallowed, his eyes trained on the landing above for any sign of Ruth. Could you wake him up, please? I know it's late, but it's very important. I can't do that, Samuel. Samuel took a shallow breath. As you say, continued Mrs. Collins, it's awfully late and you'd get no sense out of Joseph with a head full of sleep. I don't mind waiting for him to wake up. Is something wrong? I just need to speak to Joseph. Or maybe I can help. What's this about, Samuel? The boy said nothing. You should have been in bed hours ago, she said. So I'm thinking there must be a very good reason you're calling Joseph at this time of night. Wasn't that obvious? He had a reason. The most serious and bloody reason of all. But it was a reason that Mrs. Collins had found comical enough to laugh about with Ruth. Which is why he didn't answer her. Why is it, Samuel? She said. Nothing. It's only... I need to talk to Joseph. Is Ruth about? Let me have a word with her and I'm sure we can sort this out. No. Samuel said this firmly. Ruth is asleep and nothing's wrong. I just wanted to have a talk with Joseph about school. We have to write out a psalm for the Reverend and draw a picture and I wanted his help. Have you met my Joseph? Mrs. Collins sounded amused. He's hardly done a scrap of work on that thing himself. Anyway, I'm sure you can catch up with him tomorrow and work on it together. She laughed to herself. Though I doubt you'll find him much help. He needed to talk with his best friend, now. Why couldn't she understand that? Yes, that's a good idea. See, there's no need to sound so serious. I'll tell Joseph first thing in the morning. Samuel's eyes swept back up to the landing where a heavy twilight had settled, and he knew that anyone at all could be hiding within it. Mrs. Collins, please don't tell Ruth I called. Well, all right. Samuel heard the pockets of uncertainty in her voice. Mrs. Collins, please, don't tell Ruth. Please don't. It's very important. All right, Samuel. Her voice was softer now and wonderfully reassuring. I won't tell her you called. Thank you, Mrs. Collins. Good night, Samuel. The boy hung up the telephone.
This is the end of CD 4. The book continues on CD 5. CD 5.
Chapter 32. It came to him just before sunrise, the solution he'd been waiting on. It had just wandered in among his swarming thoughts and sat down in the middle of the storm. He didn't pretend it would be easy. He wasn't stupid. But now that he had it in mind, he knew he must act. All he had to do was wait until dawn. The keyhole, that unblinking eye, hovered before the boy. Samuel closed one eye and moved closer. Ruth sat on the edge of the bed with her back to him, her hair spilling around her shoulders. Her head was bent forward just so, and the boy wondered if perhaps she was praying. But then she gripped the back of her neck and rolled her head like she did whenever she had one of her headaches. She released a sigh, or perhaps it was a groan, and turned her head towards the side table. On it was the oil lamp, a picture of her father and a bottle that he thought might be wine. Samuel's eyes shifted, glancing all the way down the hall. Everything was ready. He reached for the doorknob, but he wasn't careful about it and it shook with some force. He saw Ruth spin around and that's when he ran, tearing down the corridor. He heard Ruth's door open just as he reached the landing, twisting around the corner and pressing himself against the wall. Samuel! From the sound of her voice, Ruth was probably scowling in his direction. Samuel, I'm in no mood for games! The sun was just waking.
sifting through the trees outside and rendering the upper landing a patchwork of soft light and generous shade. The perfect place to steal a glimpse down the corridor. Samuel was sure she would see it at any moment. With his hands pressed flat against the wall, the boy tilted his head, his right eye moving across the panels in a blur, then slipping free with a clear view down the corridor. Ruth was turning already, looking the other way, and when she saw it, she took in a sharp breath, and her hand went up to her mouth just as Samuel hoped it would. "Oh, Jesus," she whispered. At the far end of the corridor was his mother's dressing room. The door was wide open, the whole chamber awash with morning light. She was standing in the middle of the room in the red silk dress, its rippling folds fixed tightly to her chest and the curves of her waist. The skirt spread out around her like a halo. The neck was slim and graceful, but beyond it was nothing at all, matching the empty space at the end of her shoulders. The dust churned in the first blush of sunrise, its golden haze moving around her like the radiant glow of a headless ghost, the ghost of his mother. The shock didn't have a grip on Ruth for long. It took just a moment or two for her to really see what had startled her so. It was just a mannequin, nothing more. But the fact that it wore the red silk dress, the very dress she had pressed to her own body the night before, well, that caused her to tuck the hair behind her ears and march down the corridor. The boy watched, eyes rippling with curiosity and, yes, a little fear, as Ruth stormed towards the dressing room. "Samuel!" she barked. He was running then, in her wake. She had reached the dressing room and Samuel could hear her stomping about inside. But he knew the room wouldn't hold her for long. Samuel willed his legs to quicken. He turned abruptly and darted through the open door. With a sharp right turn, he tucked himself behind the door and did his best not to make a sound. Ruth was once again in the corridor. He heard her move up the hall towards his bedroom, throwing the door open. She called his name several times, but it didn't take her long to discover he wasn't there either. "I hope you've had your fun scaring me half to death." Her voice sounded scratched and rasping. "But I've had enough of your nonsense, Samuel Clay, and if you know what's good for you, you'll show yourself this instant." Through the seam of the door, he saw Ruth rushing past. Her eyes were wild and her mouth so tightly bunched it was barely a slit. The boy prayed to his mother that Ruth would keep walking, not stop and look inside the room where he was hiding. "You're a wicked child, I know that much," she hissed. Ruth had passed the door, but then she stopped. Samuel saw the doorknob move. He heard her breathing, quick and short from the other side, and shut his eyes tight. Then the door closed with a bang. His whole body tensed, waiting for her to grab him. A key rattled in the lock. Samuel opened his eyes and found he was alone. Through the door, he heard Ruth walking away. "I'll search every inch of this house if I have to," she hollered, her voice carrying up and down the corridor. "There's no running from me, Samuel! You should know that!" A few more steps then. "Show yourself!" Her voice began to fade, and Samuel supposed she was heading downstairs. The boy felt his shoulders relax, and he took a deep breath, glancing around Ruth's bedroom. He figured that she had locked the door to stop him slipping inside while she was searching the house. The fact that it was locked was a problem. He couldn't pretend it wasn't. But there was always the window. Though the drop was steep and he was sure he'd break his neck, Samuel didn't care. He had managed to find a way into Ruth's bedroom. He had done it all on his own, and the thrill of it tempered the cold fear stirring in his chest. Ruth's secrets were locked in that very room. Now all he had to do was find them. Chapter 33. The desk under the window called to him. It was a small table, plain and unadorned, and Samuel reached it quickly, his attention fixed on the drawer. That's where Ruth had hidden the diary, the one in which she wrote down the terrible things she had done to his mother, the violence that had taken her from him. He pulled on the drawer, but his fingers caught. It was locked. Of course it was locked. Ruth was hardly going to keep a record of her dark deeds in an unlocked drawer. Samuel had no idea how long Ruth would keep looking for him, but as she was still in her nightgown, he knew she would return to her bedroom eventually, so he had to act quickly. But how? Where would Ruth keep the key? Samuel's eyes swept around the small bedroom, and a white apron stopped him dead. It was folded and hanging on the back of a chair by the wardrobe. The boy ran towards it, 3 thoughts whirling in his mind. First, Ruth kept all the important house keys in the pocket of that apron. 2. Wouldn't that have to include the one that opened the drawer where her gruesome crimes were recorded? 3. Ruth had just locked her bedroom door. So did that mean all the keys were with her at that very moment? Samuel scooped the apron up, and, as he felt its weight, hope blossomed within him. His hand found the pocket, yanking it open. Down at the bottom was a pool of objects, a few hairpins, a set of keys on a single loop, and something else. The silver clover pin that Ruth's father had given her. The one she said she had lost. More lies. Samuel slipped the brooch into the pocket of his pajamas and hurried back to the desk with the keys. The one he needed was easy enough to find. The lock on the drawer was set into the wood, a thin slot, and only one key looked small enough to fit it. Samuel's hands quivered as he selected the key and pushed it into the chamber. He turned it and could hardly stop from gasping as the catch slipped away. Slowly, with greater care than was needed, Samuel pulled the drawer open. The boy looked down into this drawer, and his mouth fell open. His eyes narrowed and dazed all at once. This is what he found. An ink pad and stamp, a pair of scissors, a container full of postage stamps, mostly American, a handful of postcards, each from cities in America and Canada, and something else, a folded piece of paper. What he didn't find was a diary. A great mist blew up around Samuel's mind, and it was as if he were watching everything from afar. He picked up a pile of the postcards. Many were all blank. Others, like the one from Chicago and Florida, had been started and then abandoned. A crossed-out word here, an ink smudge there, all in his mother's delicate handwriting. The last postcard was from Boston, and it was unfinished. Samuel turned it over several times, looking at it or through it, and it wasn't so much that he read the words. It was more that they lifted up and danced before him. July 29, 1961. Dearest Samuel, how slowly the days pass without you, my little man. I am still in Boston meeting with a great many boring bankers. I long to have this business over with so that I can get home to you, but I fear... It ended there in mid-sentence. Ruth hadn't finished writing it yet. The ground seemed to shift under Samuel, moving or dropping away, and he reached out and grabbed the desk. Ruth had written the postcards. She had killed his mother. Truly killed her. All this time, the postcards and the promises, these were all the threads of her duplicity. The whole thing. It was all her. The boy's hands churned through the drawer, turning every postcard over. What he was looking for, he didn't know. A folded page at the bottom buckled and flipped onto the ground, and Samuel scooped it up. The page was handwritten and numbered in the top right-hand corner. 4. Page number 4. He hurried at the words. Him, but it doesn't come easily, and the harder I try, the less I feel. Does that make me sound a monster? Dr. Boyle says it will come in time and that I must be patient. My darling, I hope you will be patient too. Samuel is very lucky to have such a wonderful father, and I hope that once I am rested, the sun will shine on our little family, and I will find my place in it. With love and kisses, Margot. At the bottom of the page, some of the words had been written out several times. Love and kisses. Samuel, my... Trying, it seemed, to get the shape and angle of the handwriting just so. He read the first line again. Him, but it doesn't come easily, and the harder I try, the less I feel. Samuel thought back to the letter hidden in the atlas. The letter with the missing page 4. In his mind's eye, the last sentence of page 3 scratched across the darkness. I do so want to love. Then it fixed itself, like a link in the chain, to the first line of the page in his hand. I do so want to love him, but it doesn't come easily, and the harder I try, the less I feel. She was writing about him, wanting to love him but not being able to. His head was shaking, moving from side to side the way you do when something is utterly false. As he stared at the letter, the words began to curl around each other like a nest of serpents, like a swarm of lies. Perhaps Samuel did hear the key rattle in the door behind him and the faint screech as it swung open. But if he did, it wasn't enough to bring him back. So, now you know. That's what she said. She didn't sound angry or even upset. I suppose it was only a matter of time. Samuel didn't turn around. It was all you. The postcards? Samuel heard Ruth walking towards him. Yes, I wrote them. It was all you, Samuel said again. She struck swiftly and from behind, slapping Samuel across the side of his head. The boy stumbled, and before he could find his feet, Ruth had him pinned against the wardrobe, her hand pushing hard against his chest. What right have you got to go through my things? Have you no shame? Spit flew from her mouth, hitting Samuel in the eye. After all I've done for you, how dare you violate my quarters like a common thief? Samuel pushed on her, but it was as if she were made of stone. You killed my mother! He shouted. You killed her, and then you wrote those cards so I would think she was in America. I was right. He tried not to cry, but the grief rose up and claimed him. I didn't want to be right, but I was, and now I know what you've done. I know. What do you know? That I've looked after you the best way I know how, while your mother was nowhere to be found. Even when she was here, she wasn't. Shut up! That's what's true, Samuel. Yes, I've been writing those cards. Someone had to. Your own mother could surely never be bothered. When I saw how much they meant to you, how your eyes lit up when you got one, well, I kept on writing them. You miss us so fiercely. Those cards were about the only thing that seemed to make it bearable. For you, and for me! Samuel brought his knee up as hard as he could. Ruth groaned and her grip slackened, which was chance enough for Samuel to ram her with his shoulder, knocking her sideways. He ran to the desk and picked up the letter. You're a poisonous monster, he shouted. That's why you wrote that stupid letter. You wanted me to think that Mother didn't love me, that she was a beast like you, Ruth, who hates the ones she's supposed to love and wants them to take a gun down to the hen house and kill themselves. Ruth used the wall to get to her feet. Your mind is a malignant thing, Samuel, and it's eaten what little sense you had. I used that letter to learn her handwriting and nothing more. Liar! Do you want honesty, Samuel? She wiped her mouth and moved towards him. Your mother never took to you. You wanted so much of her, following her around, clinging to her like a monkey on a vine, and it suffocated her. Neither of you could win, you see. The more she tried to keep you at arm's length, the more desperately you wanted to be near her. You murdered her to keep her away from me, Samuel whispered. She didn't know how to be a mother. Not every woman does, Ruth shrugged. Mine didn't. It's not their fault, and it's not ours either. It's just what is. Samuel swallowed, but his throat was bone dry. I saw you with Mother's dress, dancing around like a lunatic. You killed her, and now you're trying to take her place. For the briefest moment, something bright flashed across Ruth's face. She half smiled. Your mother knew I had my sister's wedding in the autumn, and she told me I was welcome to that dress. She said the colour was garish and she'd never wear it again. Samuel saw the lies easily enough. They practically leached from her skin like poisonous gas. She twisted everything, turning the truth in on itself until it looked like something else. And she would have to be punished. Not just hung, which she surely would be, but something that might hurt even more. That's why he pulled the clover pin from his pocket. Ruth lifted her hand when she saw it. Give that to me. She made a move to grab it, and Samuel stepped back, holding it between his fingers. Olive said it wasn't real, and I can feel that it would snap easily enough in my hands. Don't! The panic was alive in her dark eyes. My father gave me that, and... You wanted him dead, said Samuel. That's what you said, wasn't it? You were happy he died because you have a black heart. You killed Robin Hood. You kill everything. I didn't kill your mother, Samuel. Ruth took a step towards him. I would never hurt her. The boy felt the fear slipping away from him, replaced by an utter stillness. You hurt me easily enough. Beat me. He pressed his fingers together and the cheap pin began to bend. Please. She had her hands out in front of her like she was trying to feel her way in the dark. I know I haven't always treated you as I should have. I don't have that way about me with children. I never have. When I left home, I didn't become a governess or a school teacher. I became a housekeeper so that I would be at arm's length from all of that. But then I came here and I found myself in a house run on credit and bad promises. Your mother needed me to keep you busy, and I did. Before I knew it, I was doing just about everything for you. I didn't seek the duty, but it was there, and who else was going to do it if I didn't? Your father? He spent most of his time in Lincolnshire trying to hold things together. There was little money to pay my wages, let alone a nanny to take proper care of you.
It was all so wrong, so awful and untrue and wicked. I do so want to love him, but it doesn't come easily. They were Ruth's horrid words. His mother did love him. She did want to be with him. She hadn't left him in the dead of night and gone abroad. It was all Ruth, every bit of it. So he said, "Murderer." The pin snapped easily enough, bending quickly, the thin metal buckling, then splitting down the middle. She flew at him, her face a mask of such fury it hardly looked like her. Samuel took off, running for the door, but Ruth was too quick. She grabbed the back of his head, catching his hair. She pulled with such force he reeled back, slamming into the side table, his ribs flushed with pain, the skin splitting on his arm. "You're right!" Ruth turned and nodded her head, panting loudly. "I killed her! What use was she to you? Margot Clay wasn't a real mother, not like I was." Samuel was still on the ground, and something about hearing the truth, the heartbreaking truth, numbed the pain and fixed him to the spot. "Didn't I do all the taking care of? Or the cleaning up after? Or the tending to?" Ruth sniffed, her top lip curling. "I did everything while your mother did her best to pretend you didn't exist. Then she tells me I'm to be let go. Can you imagine? After all my years of faithful service. So I let her go." Ruth waved her hand in the air. "All gone!" The boy began to cry. "No. Oh, yes. Poisoned her tea, I did. Then I had William help me drag her down to the river by Braddon Hall. Stuffed her in a laundry bag, loaded her up with stones and pushed her in." Ruth smirked. "She was made of stone and she sank like one. I hate you." He got to his feet and charged towards her, his arms flailing about. Ruth tried to push him away, but he was a wild thing, kicking and punching. When Ruth grabbed his neck, he sunk his teeth into her arm. She cried out and brought her fist down on his face. Samuel stumbled, tripping over the bed, and Ruth swooped down and pulled him up by the hair, and he saw in that moment that she planned to kill him, just as she had his mother. Ruth's hand found his throat again, and Samuel struck quickly, grabbing the wine bottle and swinging it at her head. The bottle didn't break, but Ruth cried out, and that's when Samuel charged at her, pushing her back. He ran past the desk, bound for the door, but her hands snared the back of his pajama top. "You devil!" she spat. She meant to finish him. He knew that. It wasn't planned what he did next. Samuel felt her reeling him in, and he glimpsed the scissors in the open drawer, just lying there. He reached for them just as Ruth was yanking him back. She spun him around, and, as she did, he lifted the blades. Just like that, they found a place in her chest. Ruth took one sharp breath, like someone had just splashed cold water on her face. Samuel pulled the scissors out, and blood seeped across the grey nightgown like a stain. Ruth's eyes were wide and pierced, but no sound came out. The boy looked down at the scissors, then up at Ruth, not sure if he could believe what he was seeing. Ruth's legs gave out and she dropped all at once to the floor, her hand pressed to the bleeding wound on her chest. "Samuel!" Her voice had lost its violence. "Please, Samuel! Help me!" The boy stepped back. "You killed Mother." She was shaking her head, and a cry came up and out of her. "I was angry at you.
That's all. I didn't harm your mother. She gulped, her eyes shutting with the pain. I was angry, and I said the one thing I knew would hurt you the most. Now it was Samuel who was shaking his head. Mother loves me. You took her away. I didn't, child. Blood oozed around her fingers. I didn't kill her. Help me. Please. I won't. With a great shudder, Ruth used her free arm to push herself up. She got to her knees, her pale face a knot of pain. Your mother is alive, Samuel. She's alive. Lies, said the boy. Using the bed, Ruth found a way to her feet, but her head seemed to whirl and she stumbled, falling over the desk. Samuel ran from the room then, still holding the scissors. He feared that Ruth would grab them and murder him just as she had his mother, and he also feared that if he stayed, she would spin her story and twist his thoughts. Ruth had murdered his mother. She wrote the postcards and that beastly letter. If you only knew how wretched I feel when he is clinging to me and calling for me over and over. They were Ruth's words. She wanted him to believe that his mother hated having him close, that his love for her was a great burden she hadn't the strength to carry. I feel as if I cannot breathe. His mother loved him best of all. I feel as if I am being pulled under the waves. It was all a pack of lies. You wanted so much of her, following her around, clinging to her like a monkey on a vine, and it suffocated her. It was all Ruth, the whole wicked thing. As Samuel ran, he heard Ruth call out from behind him. He guessed she had made it out into the corridor. He didn't look back but understood she was coming after him, hunting him, not ever stopping, because that's what killers do. Samuel! Come back! Her soul was black, black as night, so black that she was glad that her father had killed himself, and so black that she had killed Samuel's mother, taken her away from him, and then tried to make him believe that it was his mother who wanted to be far from him, that she went all the way to America and hadn't written to him once, that she couldn't bear to be near him. I do so want to love him, but it doesn't come easily. There wasn't a mother in the world that didn't want to be near her child. He knew that. Mothers love you and take care of you and fret awfully when you are far from them or even in the next room. Mothers love their children. They don't have a choice about it. I feel as if I cannot breathe. Ruth thought he would be stupid enough to think his mother never took to him, that she was always unthreading his hands from around her waist, always pushing him away, always running from him. I feel as if I am being pulled under the waves. Death was the thing keeping her from Samuel. Death was the only thing that could have. Samuel! Ruth was gasping. Samuel! Stop! The boy looked back. Ruth was halfway down the corridor, the front of her nightdress soaked in blood, her body slumped against the wall, and he saw her in agony. The blood and the feebleness, that it was Ruth's violence that had felled her. He had done what he had to do to stop her. His mother deserved nothing less. The boy ran across the landing and took to the stairs. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew that he was getting away from the butcher who had taken everything good from him, who had tried to turn his mother into something she wasn't, a mother who didn't want him to visit her in Bath, a mother who wished to be anywhere but with him, a mother who would sail to America for 121 days and never once care enough to write. Such a woman could never be his mother. She would be a monster. As Samuel charged down the stairs, he saw that the front door was open. He saw the bags upon the floor and the fluttering of her yellow dress, like the wings of a bird, and heard the unmistakable music of her voice. It's such a glorious morning, I decided to walk from the station. The sunlight spilled in and pushed all around her, and she glowed and shimmered as if she and the sunrise were one and the same, like a ghost or something. I do so want to love him, but it doesn't come easily. The boy didn't know if she was real or make-believe. He only knew that if she were there, really there, then she must have been away. Away for all that time, and in her absence, her silence, this great emptiness had grown up inside of him. I do so want to love him. and this emptiness had made his thoughts sickly and his heart ache. I do so want to love him, but it doesn't come easily. He heard Ruth calling his name from the top of the stairs. She had been right about everything. The lies weren't lies at all. His mother looked at him and then at Ruth, the smile slipping from her face. He could feel the scissors in his hand. His fingers curled tightly around them. The boy's mind, a malignant thing, grew quiet and still then. Perhaps he didn't understand what it all meant. He only knew he was running at her, and that it was too late to stop. Chapter 34. The room was bare, just a table and a few chairs. 2 cups sat on the table, both tea, one white and one black. Ruth was on one side, and Detective Rowe on the other. She had a handbag perched on her lap, and was wearing a grey dress and a small black hat. "Thank you for taking the time to come down, Miss Tupper," said the detective. "I don't recall being given a choice. It's what happens in an investigation. I'm sure you understand we still have questions." "I don't doubt that, Detective, but this is the 3rd time I've been interrogated. And I can assure you, my answers will be the same as they were the last time and the time before that." The boy sat on a chair outside. He had his favourite red fighter plane in his hand, and if you looked at him, you might think he was admiring it, but he wasn't. The door was closed. It always was. But as the room was little more than an empty box, the voices carried right to him. Detective Rowe lit another cigarette and took a long drag. He was neatly dressed in a dark suit, and his face was almost handsome, but his teeth were starting to yellow, which did him no favours. "Let's go back to Sunday, September the 24th. What can you tell me about that morning?"
"It was like any other, as I've said over and again. I got up, got dressed, and then saw to breakfast."
"And the boy?"
"Samuel woke at the usual time, right with the sun. We spoke upstairs briefly. I reminded him to finish his homework and to clean up his bedroom, and then I went downstairs to the kitchen. Samuel came down not long after, and we ate breakfast together."
"No one came to the door?"
"Not a soul."
"Did you venture outside at all?"
"Not until lunchtime." Ruth was wearing gloves and her fingers were locked together. "I had to go into the village and make a delivery to Mrs. Price, the Reverend's wife." The detective looked down at the notes in front of him.
"Mrs. Price said you had hurt your shoulder."
"Yes." Ruth straightened her back. "I slipped in the bath the night before, nothing serious."
"Mrs. Price said you seemed to be in a lot of pain."
"Not really. As I've told you before, it was just a cut, and luckily Samuel helped me bandage it, and the wound healed quickly. Though why my injured shoulder would be of any interest to you, I can't imagine." The detective looked at Ruth for a long moment. Then he said,
"Samuel didn't go with you?"
"Where?"
"To make the delivery to Mrs. Price."
"No, I told him to stay at the house and finish his schoolwork. He had a psalm to write. I was gone less than an hour."
"While you were out, you didn't see any sign of Mrs. Clay?"
"No, I did not, Detective Rowe. With great respect, what is it you think I am keeping from you?" The detective stubbed out his cigarette.
"We know that Mrs. Clay boarded the overnight train from London on Saturday, September the 23rd. And we know she got off at Penzance around 6 on Sunday morning, and then boarded another train to the village. She told the porter to send her trunks up to the house, and she left the station with 2 small bags and an umbrella."
"Yes, I know the story, Detective."
"That was 3.5 months ago, Miss Tupper, and there's been no sign of Mrs. Clay since. The last sighting we have of her is a witness who saw her entering the woods across from the station."
"Then look for her there." "We have." Detective Rowe picked at his front tooth.
"Your mistress seems to have vanished into a puff of smoke. But people don't just disappear, Miss Tupper."
"Yes, I realize that, Detective Rowe, but if you think I'm hiding her away, then you are sorely mistaken." She was scowling. "Though you should know that better than anyone. You've searched the house high and low."
"All right then, Miss Tupper. What do you think happened to her?"
Ruth cleared her throat.
I wouldn't know about that. What I do know is that Mrs. Clay had a world of trouble, and a gift from running away from it.
Seems to me she was in America to try and fix the troubles.
From what you tell me, Mrs. Clay's trip wasn't a great success. Isn't it a fact that she couldn't raise the money she was after?
What's your point, Miss Tupper?
Only this. The house is mortgaged to the eyeballs and up for sale. The company is in default, and, as far as I can tell, Mrs. Clay was about as broke as a person can be. I don't know that I would blame her if she has run off.
What about the boy?
The detective sat back in his chair and folded his arms.
What kind of mother would run off and leave her son?
Ruth sighed. Mrs. Clay never talked to Samuel, as I've told you, time and again. She even went to doctors about it, and you can check that if you like. All those months in America, and she never once wrote to him. You tell me, Detective Rowe, what kind of mother is that?
Ah, yes, the postcards.
His smile was boyish.
You wrote to Samuel pretending to be his mother. Bit strange, wouldn't you say?
Strange. I'd call it merciful. All Samuel did was pine for her, and I couldn't bear to see him so upset. She touched her hat, pushing it slightly to the left. So I did what I could to ease his suffering.
You lied to him.
And I would do it again. I found the book of postcards in a second-hand shop in Penzance a few weeks after Mrs. Clay left for America. Samuel was already asking after her 100 times a day, and coming across those cards felt like a gift from God above. She allowed a faint smile. Learning to copy her handwriting was a challenge, but I'm a quick study.
I bet you are.
Ruth huffed. After that, it was just a matter of stamping the postmark, just the date all smudged over, and slipping one in with the mail every few weeks. Mrs. Clay had mentioned a few of the places she intended to visit, so I thought it best to keep her moving about, going here and there. Ruth met the detective's gaze. There's no crime in trying to make a child feel better. Is there, Detective?
Detective Rowe peered down at his notes. We spoke to a Mrs. Collins. She said that Samuel told her son. He scanned the page. Joseph. Samuel told Joseph that he thought he had killed his mother, and... where is it? Oh, yes. Hid her body in the cellar.
The detective looked up at Ruth.
Where would he get such an idea, Miss Tupper?
Where do boys get most of their ideas, Detective? Samuel has a wild imagination, and I think you'll find that it was that fool of a boy, Joseph Collins, who planted that particular bit of nonsense in Samuel's head.
Maybe so. What I can't work out is why Samuel would be so willing to believe you could hurt his mother.
Ruth sniffed, shifting in her seat. A child's mind is full of conspiracies. As I just said, Mrs. Clay had been gone for months. Poor Samuel counted the days, and I think it was somehow easier for him to think somebody had done something to his mother than to imagine the truth, that she had gone away and left him.
But she hadn't left him, had she? Mrs. Clay caught the train back and had her trunk sent up to the house. She was coming home, Miss Tupper.
Well, she never made it, Detective. That is what I've been telling you for months. There was a knock at the door.
Yes,
snapped Detective Rowe. A constable stepped in. Got that witness from the Barker Street robbery out front.
Tell him to wait.
Thing is, sir, Mr. Norris says he's got to catch a train at 2 o'clock. Something about his sick daughter.
Tell him to wait.
Yes, sir. The constable was closing the door when Detective Rowe called him back.
Send the boy in.
He shifted his gaze to Ruth.
No objections, I take it?
I object very much. Ruth sat forward. He is a 9-year-old boy whose mother has vanished. I think he's been through more than enough, don't you?
It's just a few questions, Miss Tupper.
There was a murmur of voices, and then Samuel walked into the room and took the seat next to Ruth. The boy and the housekeeper did not look at each other.
Hello, Samuel, said Detective Rowe. Remember me?
Samuel nodded.
I'm trying to find out what's happened to your mother, said the detective. You want me to do that, don't you, Samuel?
The boy nodded.
Do you remember the day when Miss Tupper went into the village to make a delivery to Mrs. Price?
Yes.
Was there something different about that day, Samuel? Something out of the ordinary?
Ruth had hurt her shoulder and I had to pack the lemon tarts and the tea cakes in boxes for her.
You saw Ruth fall, did you?
No. She was in the bath, but I heard her cry out.
When was this?
The night before.
What time?
Samuel shrugged. I was in bed.
The detective looked down at the file. So, back to the day Ruth made the delivery to Mrs. Price. She left you home by yourself, did she?
Samuel nodded.
And while you was there all by yourself, did anyone come to the house?
Just Mr. Watson from the station.
The boy placed the red fighter plane on the edge of the desk.
He brought Mother's trunks.
Nobody else, said the detective.
Samuel shook his head.
You never saw your mother?
Detective Rowe rubbed his left ear until it was red.
Maybe you saw someone that looked like her, or maybe a stranger, someone you'd never seen before.
I didn't see anyone.
Nobody knocked on the door besides Mr. Watson.
Samuel shook his head again.
You didn't see anything unusual outside? Didn't hear any strange noises? A car, maybe, or someone crying out?
No. Samuel pushed the hair from his eyes. I was doing my homework.
The day I'm asking you about, Samuel, the day the trunks were delivered, your mother had caught an overnight train from London. Did you know that?
Samuel nodded.
Detective Rowe said, she was coming home.
Yes.
What happened to her, do you think?
How can the boy answer such a question, Detective? Ruth's voice had all the sharp edges. If you haven't any decency, at least show some sense.
I'm just asking Samuel what he thinks, that's all.
The detective lit another cigarette, and Samuel watched it seethe into life.
Where do you suppose your mother is right now, Samuel?
The boy watched the smoke coil up from the cigarette, and it made him think of Ruth cutting the baked potato and blowing on the steam.
Samuel, said Detective Rowe.
I think she is resting, said Samuel.
That's enough!
Ruth hit the table, which made Samuel jump.
I won't allow this cruelty to continue. What would a boy of his age know about such things? Shame on you, Detective Rowe.
Another knock at the door. Detective Rowe flicked the embers from his cigarette into an ashtray.
Yes?
The same constable, looking sheepish, stuck his head around the door.
Sorry, sir. Mr. Norris says he can't wait any longer, and if you can't talk to him now, well, he'll... Bloody hell!
The detective closed the folder.
Tell him I'll be right there.
He regarded Ruth coolly. I suppose we're done, but I dare say I'll be wanting to talk to you again. Detective Rowe, you may be done with me, but I am not done with you.
I'd love to sit here and chat, but as you heard,
I have a witness to interview. The detective stood up, and so did Ruth. I have a few things to say, she said, threading her handbag along her wrist. And as the person in charge of Samuel's welfare for the present moment, I have every right to speak on his behalf. He should not be subject to any more of this.
I thought there was other family.
The detective was collecting his file and didn't sound especially interested.
An uncle or something?
Yes. Ruth's voice dropped to a whisper, which seemed silly. Samuel does have an uncle, but he's unwilling to take the boy on full time. There's also a grandfather in America.
He's going to live over there, is he? Poor sod.
Ruth glanced down at the boy. Samuel will stay here in England and continue his schooling, though where that will be, I'm not sure. She cleared her throat. As for holidays, America is very far to travel, and Samuel's grandfather thinks it's best that he stays here. Detective Rowe took a long drag of his cigarette.
You're looking after him, are you?
Well... Ruth moved the straps of her handbag and seemed to have trouble finding a position that satisfied her. That's still to be worked out. Samuel turned the plane over in his hands.
Like that, is it?
Said the detective with a smirk. I beg your pardon. The constable reappeared at the door. Sorry again, sir, but Mr. Norris says, impatient bugger. The detective stubbed out the cigarette. I'm on my way. When Detective Rowe headed for the door, Ruth followed after him. I have more to say, Detective, things that Samuel need not be troubled by. May I walk with you? There were things to discuss, and Samuel was just a boy. The detective sighed. If you must. He walked quickly, and Ruth hurried in his tracks. But she stopped in the doorway. Samuel heard her clear her throat the way she always did. The boy felt her looking at him, but he didn't turn around. He guessed what he might see if he did, and he knew what it would mean. Turning around was an act of bravery, and he had no courage left. Stay here, Samuel, Ruth said. I'll come back for you. She closed the door, and it hardly made a sound. He waited to hear her go, but all was silent. Then he became aware of the ticking clock, its crisp drumbeat, and the sound of his breaths, faint and slow. He wanted to get up and go to her, to see that stern look in her eyes, and hear the certainty in her voice and know that it wasn't the end, that she wouldn't leave. But then he heard her heels on the floor outside, and Samuel understood the moment had passed. Ruth's footsteps were rapid as she walked down the hall to catch Detective Rowe, fading a little with every step. She was headed someplace else now, moving away from him. Acknowledgements. The impulse to write this book came suddenly, but not without warning. I first had the idea over 20 years ago as a budding scriptwriter, and despite it going nowhere, the story of a boy and a housekeeper lingered patiently in my imagination, waiting for me to try again. When I did, the words seemed to fly out in a hurry, as if they feared I might change my mind. For such a solitary pursuit, a great many people are involved in the life of a writer. My agent, Madeline Milburn, has taken my stories out into the world and has been a tireless champion of my literary whims. Also at the office are a fantastic team including Giles Milburn, Hayley Steed, and Alice Sutherland Hawes. I worked with 2 editors on this book who were determined to bring out the best in my writing. Kimberly Atkins at Penguin Random House Australia has sharp instincts, and I thank her for brilliantly suggesting the ill-fated rabbit. Thanks also to Catherine Knight, Beverly Cousins, and Alex Ross. John Glynn at Hanover Square Press led me through the process with insight and ease. Thanks also to Executive VP Loriana Sacalotto, VP Margaret Marbury O'Neill, Editorial Director Peter Joseph, Senior Marketing Manager Randy Chan, Senior Marketing Director Amy Jones, and Publicist Emma Flounders. My parents have been a huge support as I navigate this crazy business, and I owe them a great debt. Thanks also to Carol, Christine, Peter and Paul for support and encouragement. And lastly, thank you to Jackie, dear friend since '93.
Belinda and Penguin Random House hope you enjoyed the reading of
The Boy at the Keyhole. Written by Stephen Giles. Narrated by Kevin Spink.
Production Copyright 2018.